Hi guys, welcome to a new series about the Nik Collection. Now, the reason I'm starting a new series today about the Nik Collection is that last year DxO completed what was a 6-year-long project in completely rewriting the Nik Collection from the ground up so that it shares a common code base, a common user interface, and the entire collection presents as one homogeneous set of applications. And knowing DxO's release schedule, I think there's probably a new version coming out this May. So now would seem to be a good point to sort of take a level set, have a look at the Nik Collection in total, and then we can look forward to what's coming along in the next couple of months. Okay, within the Nik Collection, we've got two basic types of app. The first is effectively based on presets and filters, and these would include Silver Effects Pro, HDR effects, color effects, analog effects. The second type is applications that allow you to really get under the covers of the picture and start to play with the makeup of that picture. So in that category we're talking about Viveza, which allows you to change colors and to work on the colouring of the photograph in a much more detailed way than Color Effects Pro does. We're talking about Sharpener, which breaks out into two different apps to allow pre-sharpening and sharpening for print and sharpening for screens. And we're looking at Define, which is noise reduction. Now, the difference between Define and all the other noise reduction apps is that you can apply Define to discrete areas of the photograph. Now, what I'm going to do in this video is to show you the common interface, do a couple of example edits using one application from each category, i.e. one that is preset based and one that allows you to play with the detail of the picture. And then in subsequent weeks we're going to look at individual apps in a lot more detail. Okay, let's get into it. So we've got analog effects, which is broadly analogous to DxO Film Pack. You've got Nik 6 color effects. This is a set of filters and presets that allow you to set different color bases for your image. Define, which is noise removal. HDR effects. This is again a set of filters. This allows you to do HDR with multiple bracketed images or with a single image. Perspective, this is identical to DxO Viewpoint. So this is all about straightening converging verticals, about the miniature effect and so on. Nik Sharpener, this comes in two flavors of pre-sharpener and sharpening output for print and for screen. Silver Effects, probably the most famous black and white conversion filter. I've been using this for must be 15 years now. And Nik Viveza. Now, Viveza is not really a set of color filters. It's a way of treating the color independently of filters. So there are presets, and I'll demonstrate this for you. There are presets which allow you to do local adjustments on different parts of the image. All of these can be opened in standalone mode, and they can also be opened as plugins from Lightroom, from Photoshop and Affinity Photo. Here's Lightroom. I have preloaded a picture. I've run this one through Deep Prime, so noise removal has already been performed on this picture. And what I'd like to do is to look at how we might treat this in a couple of the applications in the Nik Collection, so that we can demonstrate that the interface is broadly similar, that you're working in a familiar environment, and that you can then come back into Lightroom to finish. The photo menu, and we can choose edit in, and we can choose our output from here. So I'm going to choose initially edit in Viveza. I'm going to edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments. So I haven't actually made any, but that's a that's what I habitually do. And it flags that I'm working with a TIFF file now, so it's converted the image to TIFF from the DNG original, and it's kept the alterations and it's kept the noise removals. So there's a few things here that I would probably wish to do. Let's start from the left-hand side. So here we're going from the presets that are available. Now, when we look at these initially, these do just look like filters. So golden hour, blue hour, remove color cast, fill light, darken, tonal adjustment, sharpen eyes, which is obviously not applicable to this picture because there aren't any eyes. Soften skin, again not particularly useful. High contrast, adjust sky, adjust foreground, and cool it down. What we've got here is a photograph that is taken above a cloud inversion, so we're right at the peak of a mountain in the Picos de Europa, and I just wanted to show the tip of the mountain poking through the clouds. Sun is just about up. This was taken just after dawn. So the first thing I'm going to do, I think, is to adjust the foreground. So if I choose this, now, what we've got here is a group of control points. So this is not simply a global preset. This has already applied some fairly sophisticated work to it. So what I'd like to do in my group is to move them all down a little bit, because I don't want these shadows particularly creeping in at the bottom. So I'm going to move these down and make sure that they overlap a bit better. And from here I can change global adjustments or local adjustments. So here is my group. Remember that anything I change in here is going to be changed across the set. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the diffusion to, these clouds are cotton wool, they're not, so I think if we adjust diffusion all the way just to see what it looks like, it's a bit too much there, we want something a bit subtler. And that, I think, is fine for this particular group. What I want to do now is to apply a control line to the top. I'm going to bring this down and bring it down to here. But we only want this to apply really to these clouds. So I'm going to put my dropper. Again, what I want to do is to brighten up those clouds in the sky so that they more or less reflect the ones underneath, and that's fine. And so the last thing I want to do is to do something with these rocks, because they're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to make a control point, I'm going to put it here, and I'm going to put another one, and I want to group these together, another one here, another one there. Okay, so I've got these control points, I select them all and put them in a group, and I can call that group rocks. Now let's have a look here. So I want to maybe darken down those shadows a little bit. Mid-tones. Okay, so we're getting a more sort of rocky feel to these now. I don't want to take too much warmth out of it, but notice how these changes, because it's a group, are applying across the entire range of rocks. So I think that's probably how I'd like it. And the last thing I really want to do is do something with the shadow here. New control point. Put it there. I'm selecting those shadows. Stretch this out a bit. I just want to soften those shadows. I'm not going to get rid of them completely because of course there's mountains under there, so let's just leave it at that. So here I'm just going to tweak the contrast a little bit in these mountains, just so we pick up a bit of light. I think that illustrates what we're doing with Viveza. We're really applying at a high level groups of control points. We're using control lines. The other presets will do something else, but you can see how here I've got a foreground group which came out of this panel here. I made my own group to do rocks, and I put a couple of control lines in, and that looks a lot more realistic, I think, than the original one. So apply that. And here it is back in Lightroom. So we can see here it's now edit TIFF, so we can see that we've been monkeying around with this. Now what I could do is, if I wanted to continue, I could layer this thing up by opening it up again, but I'm not going to do that. So what I will need to do is to locate the original, which was this one, and this time we're going to open it up in Color Effects Pro and have a look at that. So photo, edit in, Color Effects, again same thing, same warning here. Okay, and we've got a very similar looking interface. We've got some extra tools available to us. We've got the HSL tools, which will be familiar to you from Photolab, but let's see how this could go. So initially we might want to apply some global alterations. So I might, for example, apply a little bit of clear view. That seems to me to be fine. That's around 15. I really don't like going over 20 in clear view, and I'll show you why. This looks totally unrealistic to my mind. It's too sharp by half. So we just want to add a little bit of intensity. But coming back over to the left, this is our collection of presets, and these really are a set of presets and filters. So the one that I always head for, called Pro Contrast, and you can arrange these filters in as favorites. So if I go into Pro Contrast, I can see previews of what it might look like. So we don't want strong, that's totally unrealistic. Dynamic, let's have a look at this though. Okay, so that's auto enhance. With is too much in my opinion. I'm really not a big fan. So let's take this, we can go in here and we can, two ways to really approach this. I think this is effectively too much, so I think what I'd be inclined to do is to go in with my neutral and there's not a real noticeable colour cast, but I would start to do this manually. And you can see that these are being applied, so highlights, bring that up, and keep that at opacity. And I can add, again, I can add a control point, I can add a control line, and I can neutralize my, intersections. I can neutralize the effect of these. Slightly more ability to really get to grips with this than there is in Viveza, but I really wanted to make the point that these are more based on filters, so I can look at, let's have a look, classical soft focus, for example. That's quite pleasant. I can do bleach bypass. Again, that's quite stark, but it's nice for the sky and the clouds, actually. So I could choose to keep this as a starting point and then go to work on these rocks. And effectively, if we go into the colour selection, we can make that more warm. We can go for the cross-balance one to bring the rocks out a little bit. So these self-evidently very much a set of tools that are going to affect the whole photograph. I think I do like pro contrast in here, and I would usually use that, or at least try it. The other point I'd like to make here is that I can stack these effects up within this dialogue. So if I got pro contrast in, let's just put correct contrast randomly. Now what I can do is I can go to, let's choose colour, and I could choose here, if I use the plus, that is going to add it to my list here. So there's my pro contrast. Here's my brilliance, and here's my brilliance and warmth filter. So I can desaturate that slightly, warm it up slightly, and I can change the opacity to let the previous filter through. Okay, so this is another way of modifying the effects of these. So let's apply that one, and that will give us another version of this image. Okay, finally I'm going to open this up in Silver Effects Pro. We go to Photo, we go to Editing, we go to Silver Effects. It's the same thing. Now, I remember I could have chosen to have opened any one of these TIFFs already, but I wanted to show you these in retrospect. So this is all about black and white conversion, and so what I like a lot with this, I like the high structure ones. This is nice. There's a harsher version of that, but I would probably go for something like that. I've got very much the same things going on here. Now the only thing that I can't do here is to, these are strictly presets, and I can't pile these up in the same way that I could pile up the filters in Effects Pro. So here with this I can play with the effects here, drop those shadows, bring up the fine structure in the rocks, I can amplify my whites a little bit, bring up my contrast. And again, you've got a very, very different picture here, but it is interesting to take these presets and use them as start points. And again, here I am back in Lightroom. So I think what we've seen and what we've demonstrated is that the interfaces using common components, they vary to certain degrees. You cannot, for example, pile up the presets, but you can pile up the filters. This is kind of common sense. Some of the apps are much more geared towards filters and presets than others, and I think the bottom line here is that what we've got, and what I hope I've demonstrated, is we've got a bunch of high-level ways of working on a picture that are nonetheless quite complex, that allow you a fine degree of separation. It allows you to really get to grips with areas of the photograph and work on them in a way that would take you much, much longer in Photoshop, or indeed Lightroom. So I think these definitely have their use. We've looked at the U-point technology. I think for the money that these cost, that these are a pretty good tool. Now, in the next video, what I'm going to go to is demonstrating how these work in Photoshop. Come back next week and we'll have this tutorial more sophisticated, and we'll have a more sophisticated way of working based in Photoshop, using layers in Photoshop and using filters in Photoshop, masks in Photoshop, particularly luminosity masks, in order to determine areas of the photograph that are affected by the edits that we might want to make in Color Effects Pro. So see you next week, guys. Thanks very much for watching, and have a good week.